All right, welcome everybody. We are live, or at least it says that we're live. I'll have to go and check. But welcome everyone. Thank you for coming in and joining us. I am very excited to have Matthew Mournian here again with me. So a little bit of a synchronistic occurrence happened in the last few weeks where I'm always in my bathroom and I get these little nudges or downloads. And it was like, you need to speak to Matthew and get him on again. And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't pay attention to it and I just carried on with my day. And then a few days later, someone commented on the last live that we did. And they were like, this was awesome. You got to get him back. I was like, oh, that's right. I got that nudge and I didn't do anything about it. So here we are. Welcome, Matthew. It's so great to have you here. It's always lovely to chat and connect with you.
Thank you very, very sincerely. For anyone that's watching over there in the wilds of Australia, good morning, everyone. Where it's about 7:30 p.m. over here on the weird, sweltering, sweaty east coast of Florida, or
Oh,
no, west coast of Florida. We're on the internal part of that weird panhandle thing, but it's actually beautiful. I love the humidity, but thank you for inviting me to your channel. I mean this very sincerely. As a person who historically didn't really get invited to anything, I'm always like, oh, really? Oh, okay, yeah. So, anyway, thank you. Yeah.
oh, it's always great to have like a fellow energy worker, professional practitioner, so we can compare notes and talk about it. So we were just chatting before we hit the live, and I said to him, for me, it's been a very human sort of void space for a little while, and I always get a bit nervous coming on and doing a live because I'm like, I don't know if I've got much to say or much to talk about. But then I sort of recount, things that have occurred. I'm like, oh, there's a little bit. And you had some great validation of input of where a lot of people have been over the last sort of month or two, or I don't know, time. I'm not sure. I'm not counting.
I agree. In terms of us being in a bit of a dead zone, and I'm already instantly distracted because I just found the chat screen on this strange app. You know how many streaming apps there are now? I'm always like, oh, so there is a chat. Hello, everyone in the chat. For those of you guys that are hanging out, whether there's 2 or 20, share this video on social media. Just kind of share it, because I have a weird feeling that there's something here that's going to get said that's going to help people figure out what I think for a lot of us is kind of the reason why a number of us have been in kind of a void space. Like you said, you're feeling very human these past couple months and doing, sort of like the third density world, and, or like whatever the task is, you're like, it's, we will go back into the physical body. And I can tell you myself, I have definitely been on that. I know that for those that know me, they will already know this. I'm the least astrological kind of professional psychic or energy worker in the world, but I know that Saturn has been playing a big role in my current chart. And for me, the past few months have been this blockage and obstacle of third density authoritarian energies. Things like over here in the US, we got the IRS and other government agencies. And so, I've been very, very human as well. It's been all kinds of strange red tapes and cumbersome moments in navigating the human experience, but it's also been, and I think this is the reason why I'm opening up with this weird rant. We have also been given a chance over the past, what I call like this strange summer of 2022, to experience what I call the strange transient emptiness of the human condition. And it's those periods, and I will pause right after this. It's those periods, I think, that we're just coming out of, that precede massive changes for people on the earth plane. And what do I mean by massive changes? Character shifts. The version of you that you are here right now is about to take a really big corner turn. And so, anyway, that was a big jumbled up mess of all kinds of stuff of what I've been feeling. What do you think about it?
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. Like what you were saying about Saturn, I have a couple of astrology friends, and on the days where I'm feeling really uncomfortable, like they'll send me a text, and I'm like, "What are the planets doing?" And they're like, "Oh, Alisha, Saturn's like transiting your north node, and it's uncomfortable." I'm like, "Yeah, it's uncomfortable." Um, so what I understand from that is just like there's a lot of like karmic stuff that's going to play out. I'm like, oh, fun, yeah, fun. But I talk about I went through this phase around this time last year too, and when I hit into this, I was like, oh no, not again. Like I can't cope with that. That last year went for about 3-4 months and it was very uncomfortable. But I understand it as like a tapped out phase. And I feel like in these phases, and I sort of what you were saying, I know that precedes a big shift. But I noticed that I'm very, very active in my sleep state. Like every night is a different adventure. I'm doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And so it's like, I feel like I understand it because like I'll be going about my day. And if I close my eyes, I can tap back into where I was in the dream. Yeah.
Whoa.
And I'm like, oh, I'm still there. That's why
yeah.
it feels so human, you know. But a couple of nights ago, and I think the animals have been really feeling this energy because I don't know about you, but like, I don't know if you have any animals, but I have 2 dogs.
Not personally at the moment, but I pray to God we will in the coming year. But anyway, go on. So you have a couple dogs, and they've been probably getting a little bit weird, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, like for 2 months now. Like one of my dogs, a female one, she's much more in tune. I always joke. I said they're not really dogs; they're galactic beings in fursuits, and one of them's incredibly sensitive to energies. Like even I've watched her over the years with like Schumann jumps and she'll just go spastic. And so for the last 2 months, every night, as soon as I go to bed, I can feel this weird energy come in. And then all of a sudden she's up and she's pacing around the house. And this goes on all night. And I thought, I mean, she just had a surgery. So I thought, oh, maybe, trying to like, oh, maybe she's in pain. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And in the last week, I was dog sitting the neighbor's dog. And the night where it was our evening when the announcement came through about the Queen. That dog, that dog sat upright and started growling, like, and barking, and it sort of brought me to. And I didn't even open my eyes. I just sort of tuned in, and there was like the darkest entity I've ever seen in my bedroom. And it kind of had this very sort of reptilian sort of dragony, blacky. I can see it, but it's kind of like this apparition of sort of a darker, and I could feel the fear just rush through my body, when like all the life force gets drained out of you. And I was like, oh God. And and in that time, I just went, I'm too tired to deal with this. I haven't slept properly in months. And I just like called in white dragons, and I saw them just sort of sweep it and take it up and out. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I just fell back asleep. And then I woke up, several hours later, and my dad had been insistently calling me since 6 a.m. He's like, the Queen's dead, the Queen's dead. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting.
Whoa. So, I have a couple questions about that, if I may. Yeah. And I guess the first one is sort of like a collective question, and that is just in general, what's the temperature like with the people in Australia about the vibe of the Queen? Because you imagine over here in America, I'm just gonna say it, like it's like it's a spectacle that most of us have no relationship with, so we base our opinions off of the flagrant sensationalism of like television, and so a lot of people are told like you must be upset. So a lot of people are like, but other people are like, how is it over there? Because you guys have a much closer relationship, right? At least on some level, culturally, right?
Well, I guess so. I mean, I've never really felt a personal connection with it.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm always like, what are they really? I mean, granted, are they human, not human? Does it matter? But anyway, how is it out there? What are they like?
Look, I feel like I'm in my own little pocket and zone, but I know just based on social media, there's the different versions of reality. So you scroll and there's like one person mourning, and then the next person celebrating. And so I decided like I'm just gonna like pull myself off social media for but I don't know. I think I had I've got clients in the UK, and I've been asking them like, what's the vibe going on there? And they said there's just an outpouring of grief, especially in the city centre. But it's like working, or what one of my clients described to me last night was that, going into the city, you can feel the collective grief that's like, I guess, being utilized to help people purge their own grief that they're holding within them. But from Australia's vantage point, like, we get another public holiday.
Right.
So,
There you go. That's always good.
which I don't know because I don't run to public holidays, but I
Me
believe it's
either.
next Thursday, which is equinox. So that's when I'm running the dark and light transmission. I was like, oh, cool. So I don't know if that's going to
You
be
know
a
what though? Sorry to instantly like cut in, but it is kind of a cool thing that the worldwide or like the human holidays don't really affect you. You know what I mean? It's like it would literally be the same for me. I'm like, oh, everybody's off. Oh, really? Oh, cool. All right. Yeah. Anyway, you know. But so anyway, everybody gets another day off. You guys are gonna do like you said you're gonna do a workshop or something.
Yeah, I'm doing a transmission for. I'm going to do a dark and light transmission that sort of came through just to, I think this is a time to be able to find neutrality in observing the different realities, but not like diving into, the polarity of, either one. And I think that's just kind of what I've been seeing with, any sort of worldwide event. There's this vast sides, and it's like we kind of need to kind of bridge that. So but yeah, I'm not sure. I think, yeah, I haven't noticed any. I mean, I did hear another friend of mine who's in Canada. She said that a lot of the Commonwealth legal systems have been like delayed in proceedings and things like that because of the Queen's death. But other than that, yeah, nothing too notable.
Huh. Okay. So sorry. Here comes question number 2. I guess I'm asking you questions now today. Sorry. Question. The other question I would have for you is you also mentioned that there was like an entity or some feminine being that kind of showed up, and I noticed in the chat someone said obscurus aurora, which I'm curious, what is that? And so I would like to know, like, do you believe that the presence of that being or that energy was related to the energy of what sounds like the queen dying? And before you answer that, I will tell you why I'm asking that, because a lot of people, as soon as they got the news, they're like, the era is over, it is finished, this being is gone, almost like all the darkness is gone, it's all over now, we just won. So depending on what side you're on, do you think that was related to her passing?
I do. I think the timing of it, but I think that maybe that was just one of many, because I did have reports coming from other clients that had a very similar experience on that evening. So there was, but I don't. I have
Yeah.
to say, I hate to sound pessimistic, but I don't think that it's. I think it's a marker, yes, but I don't think that everything is, instantly cleared off the planet. I think it's just, it's a marker of progression, perhaps.
Interesting.
What do you think?
Well, this is the reason why I asked you those questions about it, is that I guess first off, and I was instantly distracted in the chat by the reply. It's an entity from Harry Potter, like a shadow form that magical being releases when triggered by emotional experiences. Damn, I don't know how I missed the obscurus, having like Harry Potter is one of the only series that I actually have seen all the movies and I think read most of the books of. So I'm like, how did I, dude? I'm slipping. I'm like, whoa, really? Which, like when you're like, I thought I knew about that thing. Anyway, all that aside, I am one of those people, like a lot of others. As far as I can tell, and here's the thing: I always am one of these individuals. It's like I'm not like a predictor of world events when it comes to being a professional intuitive. But what I've realized I'm very, very effective, or I shouldn't even say effective. What I enjoy doing in a positive way is looking at the fabric of certain events or things that take place and discerning what energies or the passage or the way they're, just looking at the condition, the energetic temperature. And when I looked at I think I was actually doing a live and somebody was like, hey, the queen died. And I was like, what? Damn. And I said it at the moment, literally at the moment. I was like, I don't know, because it feels like she died a while ago. But, lo and behold, a lot of other people believe that. But when I look at the fabric of what I would call a conscious person or a living being or one that has previously lived that's not living now, what I've noticed is that, and here's the thing, I'm not necessarily what I would call a medium from the perspective that I connect routinely with beings that have passed on. I honestly kind of don't even really try, and who knows, maybe I should. But what I was able to perceive about the Queen, and I also think you'll notice this because a lot of time was spent, looking at other conspiratorial things in years past, like JFK Jr. and Princess Di, and all those people that they said were still alive. What I noticed was that there was a similar fabric or a charge around the energy of the Queen's consciousness. And what I noticed was that it seems like it will be elevated or sort of inflated at a certain stage. And I think that's due to the energy that rises up, at least in her case, after the physical container passed. Now, when I look back on what I call the timeline, which for those of you guys that maybe you're into this, maybe you're not, it's a very subjective thing and everyone views it differently. But when I looked at what I call the collective timeline of, the energy of the Queen, from what I could tell, I believe that her physical body, the physical self, the container of what we call, it feels as though that the entirety of that frequency was gone sometime around the earlier part of this year, which is interesting because when you look at what other people say and, so-and-so, circles of, like whatever website or blog or channel, they're like, she died in 2020. Who knows? Maybe she did. If there's one thing that I feel very confident in kind of saying about the energy of this person is that the consciousness of the physical container that contained that being had left already. And so that opens the door for possibility that it was inhabited by something else, which I think is a whole other can of worms if you want to get there. I think that's par for the course for everyone that's in the royal family. There's a stage in which number of rituals or a predetermined process takes place and another entity or a being or, whatever you want to call it, a spirit enters a container. But from what I could tell, I think that the spirit left that container some time ago. And I would even go so far as to say it has been transferred into another one, meaning that I think that she's part of the group of, I mean, a lot of people already believe this and know it, or, they think it's real, that they will sort of switch bodies throughout history and they will enter another container. And from what I believe, I think if there is any truth to what I'm saying, I think earlier this year marked the switch over of that consciousness into another body. Maybe she had been dead already. Maybe the physical container died last week. But I think that there was some form of a ritual or something that took place in which whatever the real essence of the Queen was transferred over to another. What's crazy is I do not believe it was King Charles.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Well, yeah. As I'm listening, I go back and I think about some sessions that I had done earlier in the year. It could have been around April time, and I was seeing a lot of like darker entities that have been inhabiting through like dark feminine sort of hosts and things like that, and that was getting cleaned up around that time. And I'd seen that repeatedly in sessions, and then you go on and you forget about it, and then something happens, and then you're like, oh, I wonder whether that was just like it coming down into the physical space. But
do you mean like a total cleanup of the entire kind of operation, or of an individual event or moments that were taking place with that individual at the time? Does that question make sense?
Well, I think it was earlier in the year. Like I was interacting with this sort of dark octopus type entity, and I could see that it had energy tethers that went into different people. That was kind of like a dark or distorted feminine energy. So I was sort of having a little bit of an astral battle with that thing, and as you do, and I could feel like it was kind of releasing its restraint on those that it held energy within. But as as a result of that, I got incredibly sick after that, and my physical body took a real hit. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question exactly. I think
That's
it's just
okay. Yeah.
it's just observations, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what. I mean, I know a lot of people in the truther communities and stuff like that are expecting big things after the funeral, but yeah, we'll see.
I feel like it will lead to more false flags and a just a longer period of the slow stranglehold of control structures. Like they're just gonna little by little over the next coming months and years in a very, very symbolic way. But
Mm.
here, I'm going to make a awkward lane change here and say a really crazy thing, which probably, I don't know, I probably shouldn't even say it, but whatever. A lot of times, kind of like you, how you said when you knew you were gonna reach out to me, maybe you were like in the bathroom or doing some random thing, and you're like, boom, suddenly I just, whoa, there it was. And so this is why this comment will sort of fit over the past day or so, as I've been thinking about, like, oh yeah, okay, we're going on this show. What are we going to talk about? I don't know. I think this was yesterday morning, about 10 a.m. our time, and I was actually just like you were saying. I was in the shower, and I'm kind of standing there, and I will like lean my head against the side of the wall and like close my eyes and do like a meditation thing, and here's the crazy thing. It feels dumb talking about this because I don't usually talk about the intricacy of the what I would call entities or beings that I perceive. But the wild thing is that within that space, sometimes I'll sort of just sit there in what I call like a void space or like an internal realm. And it's like I'll wait and certain things or what I call like beings or just stuff will sort of float by, kind of like when you're in the dark at night and your eyes adjust. And after a while, you're like, oh, yeah, whoa, there's a thing. And one of the things that I perceived in that moment was a thing that it's like it was a little bit triggering and a little bit weird, but it was so out of the norm that I realized that now here, this was the reason why I perceived it. What it was a woman type of a being, and she had like it was like a white face, but the rest of her body was like weird sort of leather and like kind of shiny tentacles. And this
Mm.
being was so large, I was shown how it would come down from the ceiling when people were in a sleep state. And the thing that really creeped me out about it was that the mass of tentacles that made up this being's body would take up the entirety of the space above you, so that
Mm.
when you would perceive this being, it would be everything, like this
Mm.
gigantic mass of tentacles. And in the center was this, it was sort of like the face of like a humanoid, or like it was very much like a woman. But it's
Mm.
funny because here's the thing, as a person that works around these sort of things all like crazily enough pretty much every day, I don't necessarily get very specific. Energies will come in and things will happen, and I'm like, whoa, that was a weird thing, or there I perceived a fragment of this thing. You know what I mean? It's usually not that like where I'm like, whoa, it's this feminine being that does weird stuff to people in a sexual way from the dream space, from that fourth density astral space. And here you are a couple days later, and you're like, man, I don't know, I perceived this weird being, and it sounds oddly similar in a very weird way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I just saw in the chat that someone was saying that they saw that too a few months ago. So, um, yeah, and it's interesting because that was sort of the energy that I felt with that being, was that it distorts the sexual energy within females. I mean, males too, perhaps, anyone. But I guess through the intimacy exchange, then it can spread like a
Mhm.
virus or disease. So it's like it infiltrates into one person who may be open and not understanding about their energy, body, and system. And then from there, through an intimate or sexual exchange, it then
Totally.
gets passed to another person. What do they call it? STD, spiritually transmitted
Oh no, it's
disease.
literally real. It's literally
Mm.
real. I had an experience. Some of the people in the chat that kind of know my story. I had an experience with some of the pumped up secret space program celebrities over the past few years, and I've literally got to view the phenomenon of the sexually transmitted spiritual disease. And what's crazy is I commented on it without knowing what it was, and it turns out the literal thing that I was viewing was real, and it was like a residue that would exist upon a person's body after they had an encounter with a person that carried this very heavily charged thing. But what it did was, it wasn't like it would tune people into like some weird negative alien AI thing. What it actually did was that it would create I have weird terms that I use. It would create an affinity toward addiction and perversion. It would cause a person to become addicted and obsessed with not necessarily specific drugs or behaviors. It was whatever the next indicated kind of distorted bubble was within their body. Meaning if they already had a pre-installed issue with, like porn or whatever, it would like metastasize into that. But it was a thing that was getting passed around at the time, and it was wild because at the time I could literally see like this ring around. It was really gross and weird. It was like a residue around people's faces and on part of their neck, and strange. It gets really weird out there.
Similar things more times than I would like to.
Right? Crazy, dude.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But you just triggered a thought that I had, after the Queen's passing, and I had pondered on this a little bit over the years, because I know I did a video at the end of last year talking about the Queen's passing and potentially what that could do for humanity. And it takes me back to a lot of the testimonies of people who are in the secret space program, that when the abuser or the handler or the one who has like sort of brought them into the programs after they pass away, that's when the retrieved memory starts to come back for the person, and they start to come back into understanding their traumas. And I thought, wouldn't that be an interesting concept of just, if I'm just going to put it out there, if that the whole monarchy has imposed this sort of abuse and ritual abuse down through the different tethers, all the people who have been affected by that start to reclaim lost fragments of their memory and the trauma that's maybe been blocked. That would move into a very interesting phase of healing, I think, because one of the things that I have noticed that's been very, very prominent is like a lot of retrieved sexual abuse and ritual abuse, a lot of working with a lot of clients who've come forward and started to remember a lot of memories. And sometimes they're bleed through memories of different multidimensional aspects or past lives, but like that has been a very predominant theme since May. And I felt like we had an eclipse around that time, and then we're going to go through another eclipse in Scorpio season, and I thought that passageway is going to really bring that theme up. So it's interesting with the passing happening sort of in the middle of that, if that's going to be a real thing that we're going to see a lot more.
That's an interesting observation, and I would like to say that it feels as though there will be another wave of collective revealing, yet probably, or maybe possibly, on an internal level, meaning like for memory fragments, pieces of previous knowledge, what could be a correction in memory sequences for some people. And the reason why I say that is because I've also noticed that a lot of people that are coming to the stage of memory recovery or sort of picking up certain things, it's like there's a period where we define our memories or our experiences through what we've heard from others, for lack of more specific individual remembrance. It's like you'll filter it through someone else's experience. I think a lot of that is kind of where people are coming to the conclusion that, boom, suddenly I'm in the secret space program. Slam. Yesterday I just remembered it all, and it's just as identical as this other person's experience. What? Doesn't mean they didn't have that experience. I think it's like we're learning the process of collective memory uncovering. And it's like we're going to resonate with certain things, and certain things are going to happen. And at certain stages of the journey, like I would say, and who knows, maybe I'm already twisting off the essence of your comment, but what I notice is that over the past few years in the work that I'm doing is that certain energy centers on the body will come to a different state of vibration. One of the most ones that I think everybody can kind of identify with is the Earth Star chakra down at the bottoms of your feet. When we start to realize that, maybe I'm like this hybrid awakening being and I'm not entirely human. You know what I mean? When we start to realize those things about ourselves, that's a theme that takes place with the Earth Star chakra. And what I think is that at least through the next few years and months and days and however long we have in this strange human experience, when we move through seasons like that, seasons after there's been a massive event or certain things take place on the earth plane, we go through these collective levels of the next barrier comes off, the next piece comes off. And so I have a feeling it's going to be an uncovering of more of the secrecy and the damage that's been done, kind of like you were saying with some of the ritual sexual practices, some of the, the practices of, pedophilia. And I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to say that on your channel, but, some of the allegations that we hear about these crazy royal people. But anyway, I wonder if that will happen.
I think it's going to bring, I think that's going to bring energy to the forefront. I think that's always going to, I've always felt that's going to be the theme. Looking astrologically, I think the North and South Node, Taurus and Scorpio, and I was like, oh, here we go. Let's bring all that, that darkness to light and purge that out. But like on the flip side of that, like a lot of my work at the moment now, and it's kind of really beautiful and joyful, is a lot of women going through different types of pregnancy, conceiving, and I feel like the passageway of that opening up is really ramped up. And so I think the more we expose that, it brings a greater passageway to more light beings coming on the planet. So that's something to look forward to, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything that you can tell us more about how you've been noticing maybe people are becoming pregnant or conceiving, or kind of how that process has been going within your work? Because it's kind of a thing that I miss out on in I don't get people coming to me so much about that stuff, but which is kind of appropriate because I deal in other areas. But I have observed in my own way, and maybe this is such a cheesy thing to say, but it feels right now that there is a very large, what I would call like a backlog or a lineup of all of these souls that are like, we're coming, we're about to come, we're right about to. And it's like, it's trickling in a weird way, like drip, one's coming through. There's like this massive thing, which to me, I guess, could signal that there's going to be a greater event. But it's weird because at the same time, when you look at what a lot of people believe is, the damage from the forced medical treatments that we won't name, is that one of the hallmarks of that is the complete loss of fertility and an utter dropping of the birth rate on planet Earth. And so I guess the question I have is, as a person who's much more tuned into those things, how is it? What are you seeing? Is there different problems? What's been going on?
I think what I see in my work, it's very common that these beings that want to come through hold a different frequency that that potentially the mother doesn't yet possess. So often what I see, there's like what I call a lot of test runs. So it's like the child will come in for a short period of time, almost to dip their toe in and like, is it safe? Yeah, is it safe? And often, a lot of women will go through multiple miscarriages in order to, and, that can be very, create a lot of grief and, sadness and different sort of levels of emotion. But from the spiritual perspective, from the, from the soul's perspective, it's like, well, we need to attune your frequency for you to be ready to hold the frequency that matches where we're coming from. And you're not there yet. So each time we're going to come in a little bit more. And it's almost like these avatars or these beings are like trying to fit into the density. And it's like they come in and they're like, whoa, whoa. But what I've been seeing is like, oh goodness, like when I started this work, I thought, wow, this is such a niche market, honestly.
It still kind of is, maybe. I don't know.
And I thought, oh, I don't know if I can make a living out of it. And now, I hold circles for women who are going through different, I always say different types of pregnancy. Sometimes they're light conceived, sometimes they're physically conceived, but and now I have like this greater group of women that are joining each month. And it's just, it's really uplifting for me to, reflect on the journey that has been so long and so, heartbreaking at times for me. And then to have this community that's coming together. And I was always told when the community of women start to come together, that's like the tipping point of the children wanting to come through. So probably in the last month, a vast majority of my sessions have been women either conceiving or in the process of. So, yeah, it's really exciting. And I always said, a lot of these children won't be born until the frequency shifts on the planet to, at least a notch up or a couple of notches up. Like, and I think you're right. I think there has been a backlog, especially over the last 2 years. They don't want to come in during the chaos. They want to come in here when, you know, there's a time where there's a lot more lighter energy, but also ready to help bring healing. So, yeah.
Oh, so it is true. They are all waiting to come in. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, like it is for me, really, because I don't necessarily talk about that element with a lot of people, and I'm literally going purely on like, well, it feels like this, and I sort of look into this weird place in my head and ask these questions, and this is the thing I get, and so it's always good to hear little fragments of that back when I like give them to people, and they're like, well, actually, yes, it's very helpful to me because, as you probably have already heard, I'm like so self-taught when it comes to this weird thing that we're doing. Which also leads me to another interesting comment that you had made, and that was that you were like, "Man, how will I?" or something to the effect of, "How will I support myself in this strange thing? Are there even enough people, or am I?" Or who knows what the question was, but I have noticed that that is the stage for a lot of us right now when granted there's many missions in this life, but there will be certain stages of identity and versions of you that will come to the forefront. And one of the things that I learned very quickly in the beginning about it is there's a stage that happens for people when you find elements of your true identity. And it's that those questions, it's like they just go away. And it's like, you'll be like, how will I ever make it? And then boom, here we are years later. And it's like, oh, and I got this group and this group. And it's not that it's an accumulation of energy, but what it is the ways in which spirit will support those who are doing what they're truly here to be doing in the moment. Because the thing is, that was a huge question that I had for myself when I started this, because I'd been talking about it a lot lately, but I was like, I had no teaching. I had no previous set of knowledge. I had a bitter awakening and a couple people nudged me forward. And I was like, whoa, here we go. Jumped off the cliff. And I think kind of maybe you had a few people in your life like this. I know I had a number of them, and they were like, oh, don't worry. He'll be back in a month. Don't worry. He'll be back in a month. He's having a midlife crisis, or something. And it's like, actually, it was something totally different. But anyway.
I had a lot of lashback from my family in the beginning. They were like, can you just go back and get another job? And I was like, I can't. I have been kicked out of the matrix, for lack of a better word, and I will never be re-entering. And there was a time period because like money was very scarce. And oh my goodness, like and that was a great process of mastering like poverty consciousness and like clearing. Like I just went through such deep levels of clearing that poverty consciousness of like going back lifetimes after lifetime, vows and this and that, and like it was wild. And every time I was like, yeah, I'm here, and oh no, deeper level. But I had because I went from teaching. I was teaching in like a program that was around like mental health and giving people like skill sets to re-enter the workforce and things like that.
Totally.
And I was paid really well for it. And then that company went bust, and 2 weeks after my Kundalini awakening, just boom, boom, as it
happened.
And someone had contacted me from my old work saying that there was an organization that were trying to run basically the same program that I had run for years, and they were looking for a teacher. So I went for a job interview, and they never got back to me. And I was like, I was the perfect candidate. I had run that program that they were looking to run for several years. But I knew like it was not.
Yeah, they were like, nope, we have another plan for you, dear. You don't need to repeat that cycle. Huh.
No.
Whoa.
But I think, and I always say this because I don't know about you, but a lot of my clients are already working in the field of energy. Some sort of practitioner in some form is the vast majority of the people that I work with. And I think it's great because I think everyone has a certain flavor and a skill set, and each one is really uniquely different. And I always say, like, they're in that pocket, they're in that pocket, they're in that pocket, and they're they're reaching a demographic that will never find me. Like, I'll be so way out there for some people. And so I think it's great that there's like this filtered system, or creating this community where each one has like through their own life experience and skill set, they'll reach people that resonate for them. And that's how I see there's these little pockets everywhere. But so I'm very encouraging of people jumping off that ledge and landing where they need to. And I think there's a big call for that. Like, I don't know about you, but I've been called to go back and teach my practitioners training.
Like we said earlier, this is like we said earlier, and like I have observed at many stages over the past couple months, this is the stage of the human journey in which a lot of us, it's like the school year's starting again, and everyone's doing some form of a teaching or a class or, whatever it is. And some people would say, oh, well, everybody's doing that. Why are you also doing that? And I think because that is the assignment for many of us on earth right now that are embodying the path of whatever it is that we chose to become or do or represent or reflect. And it's like at a certain stage, you will feel that call from spirit. And so to me, I think it's the most appropriate thing that you can be doing. And strangely enough, and I'll mention this at the end, we too are also starting a whole new cycle of educational stuff, which this is the third time we've done it. And like each of the times I'm like, am I really doing this? And, and yes, we definitely are. And it's like an all encompassing thing, but I have a little bit of an awkward question as a person. I guess for me, in the weird niche that I'm in, it's like, we are now training people literally to do this thing that we're doing. And we've had success in it. And then we've also not, at times you will realize, well, that definitely didn't work for so-and-so. They didn't get it, or not that they didn't get it. Maybe the frequencies didn't match up. But here's the question that I would have, and I'll probably be talking about this question more. Why do you think it doesn't work for some people when they will transition into a stage of their life where clearly there is a talent and ability, healing has taken place, and they will try to launch themselves into this certain mission or this stage, and it's like nothing happens? Why do you think that is? I know that's a really big loaded question, but what do you think causes that?
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be belief systems for the individual, and sometimes I think it's part of the initiation process. And I think a combination of that, or I think it's sometimes people aren't quite ready. So I've kind of seen a pattern where people get really gung-ho and then they throw everything into it. But I feel like then there's like a lot of inner work that comes up as part of that process. And that's what I've always taught over the years, is that as you step out into this work, you're going to come up against so many different challenges that is going to make you continually keep evolving and evolving. And I think sometimes people hit a threshold that they're not prepared to move through. And, I mean, it's individual really. And also I think for some people, maybe they're premature for their time. And I think I can speak to my own experience of that, because I tried multiple times and it never really got full leverage. And I think because I was needed to be in the 3D world of working with other people. And so I think it's, I always talk about like the process of manifestation from like the human standpoint, or the soul led. And I think if we're paying attention to our soul, our higher self, we'll always be navigated into where we're meant to be. But sometimes we fight that, Yeah. For that. What do you think? Why do you think it doesn't?
Man, that's a very good question. And I guess it's a question that's been going through my head a lot, because we're doing the third iteration of this group training thing. And honestly, what I have been one of my most recent conclusions is that it's truly an individual process for each person. I think that for some people, there are elements of self-healing. Well, I wouldn't say for some people, I would say for each of us that are stepping into the version of themselves that embodies, whether it be the spiritual practitioner, the teacher, you could call it a healer, you could call it a professional intuitive. As far as I could tell, or maybe this is me, because I think like a lot of us, we filter everything through our own experiences in some way, which I will do clearly. But I noticed that for me, the primary obstacle that stood between myself being able to do this on a larger level and being limited to like something else had to do with self-healing and like elements of myself. And it's like I always say that the first mission of those who are stepping into this work on a full-time basis is you. It's like literally your first client is yourself. And that could take a number of forms, but I think alongside that there's a number of other things that will take place. I think certain people have a chapter of service that is slated to begin at different stages of the human journey. I think some of us will come in and there, every now and then, clearly there's also big ego issues with it as well. And I'm not saying that, we're all, everyone has a number of layers of that. But one of the things that I've noticed with the people that have been successful, and, granted, it's not always about success, and, it's really about being of service and kind of holding the light in this frequency. But the people that I have observed that we've worked with that have done it on just a much more substantial level, where they kind of embody this path and become this thing, I think that in those cases, it comes to full ownership of who and what you are. And when I say full ownership, I mean it's all the way down to the modalities and the frequency of energy that you're using. I think that when you create your own version of everything, your own frequency, your own techniques, to me, what I've noticed is that's kind of like a defining factor for a lot of people. But anyway, it's different in each case, and watch out, because I can feel myself. I will literally ramble on that one forever. But the reason why I will shut up very, very quickly after this. The reason why I'm going on and on about all this is because, like you and I were talking before we started, we're at the stage of the human journey, especially kind of at this later part of the year, where people are doing the character change. You're shifting into a new persona. But I mean, and who knows what that is, but what are your views on all that? I know that was a lot of stuff.
No, I love that. I love it when you go on your wild rants. It makes so much sense to me. I can attest to that because I have recently been called to finish my book. Now, this book has been 7 years in the making. And I pick it up every year and I'm like, all right, it's time. And I write a few chapters. I'm like, and I put it away. And then I come back to it and I pick it up and I read it. I'm like, oh, that shit, scrap it, start again. And
yep. Right. You're like, oh my God, this is horrible. Okay. Anyway, go on.
And anyway, so now I've been given a deadline that it has to be done,
What is the deadline? What's the deadline?
I don't know if I want to say because it's not that
I
far
know.
away.
I know. I'm trying to get you to say it so you get held to it. Here, I will ask you why the deadline is, and then you can choose to answer. We're on a very similar timeline. It's getting pounded into my head so much lately that I actually went out and got a reading from someone going, help me understand this thing. I feel like I've tried this. But just like you're saying, you write it, you destroy it, you bring it back, you rehab part of it, you put it back together, throw it away all over again. Multi-year process. But yeah, what's your deadline? What is it?
End of this month.
Oh, whoa, okay, wow. That's determination. I honestly, you definitely can. I haven't given myself a deadline. Maybe I need to.
Well, it just sort of came to me intuitively. So I actually picked up every version that I've written over the years, and I put it all together, and I've got 40,000 words. So really, realistically,
so it's there, huh?
An average novel is about 60,000. I had to Google that because I was like, how long does this need to be?
Wait, what is the average? Hold on, because I also need to know this. Wait,
60,000 is the average.
Okay. So
I was like, all right, okay, cool. And I just read through it, and I was like, look, I was at very different levels of consciousness when I wrote that, but what has come through to me is like, just leave it as it is. Like, and as the book progresses, it's like it moves through my states of consciousness as I expanded, and I wanted to write it in a more linear context, but I got told no, because you're gonna, like, the reader's gonna like, you've got to write it in the process of, because obviously there's been a lot of early childhood memory retrieval that's come in at certain parts, accounts, and I wanted to write it in a chronological order, and it was like, no, you're going to lose people. Like, you can't go da da da, boom, alien abduction, and then and so I feel quite content with it. And as I've read it, I actually read it to a friend of mine last weekend, from start to finish. And as I'm reading it, I was like, I now know why I'm being called to write this, because reading it, and it's the story of my life. Like, it's all true fact of accounts that have happened to me, from, when I was born till now. It feels like I'm reading someone else's story. I do not have any attachment. I can't even, like, I understand, like, I've actually had to jog my own memory and go, oh, wow, that happened. Oh, yeah, okay, right. And so when you talk about this character changes, I feel like I've moved into a different embodiment of myself, and to complete that story completes that chapter. And so I feel like the pressure's on now.
Well, you've definitely evolved then, you know what I mean? When you kind of like look back on the versions of yourself and don't even identify with it, or you do and you're like, whoa, what was I thinking? Oh God, really? I was doing that. Like, I think when I started this journey, and I kind of like you, when I started putting stuff together for this book that I would just knew I had to write, it was like back at the stage, probably like you, where I was doing just totally different type of clearings and work. And oddly enough, I had this thing in the beginning. I don't know, maybe you had a weird technique, but I had this idea that the best way to move energy was from people's fingertips. And I would sort of chart like the meridian pathway. And I would sort of like literally in this little office in Los Angeles, and I would like hold people's fingers and like pull this energy out. The thing is, it definitely worked. But when I look back at that version of myself now, I'm like, really? That was, wow. Okay. I mean, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just like, how you'll think like, this is the way. This is it. I figured it out, and we all have to go through an evolution. I think I was also doing that with the ears a lot at the time. And here's the thing, it doesn't really matter what the type of technique or whatever you're using. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's just, you'll observe how you'll look back on yourself and the processes and the techniques, and it's like, whoa, everything has really changed. Has there been any weird changes for you like that, where you're like, damn, I used to think it was this, but it was that, or I can't believe I used to always do this thing?
Yeah, well, I'm also writing my practitioner's manual, so I kind of also, yeah. You know what? I don't do one thing. I do many things at once. And yeah, so I'm going back to how I used to do it, like 5-10 years ago, and then building. I was like, oh my God, the techniques that are built over that time. And I look back of how I originally started doing the technique that I use, and I was like, I don't do that at all anymore. Like, but yeah, weird things. Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah. So I don't see clients in person anymore.
I don't either, although I would if I could. But anyway, go ahead.
I think there's a time that's going to come. I've actually seen images. Whether this will come to pass or not is that I am one of those people that truly believe that if there's been ill effects of people who've been damaged because of the vaccination, I do believe that it can be reversed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I feel like I've seen like little snippets of clinics of where working with different practitioners for that. Yeah. So if that's to come, cool. We'll see. I'll stay open to it.
I hope so. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I've seen a similar where I'm like, you know what? The whole other race of people is going to be called on when those things come into practice. And it's like all these people are going to start showing up. And anyway, go on. So you used to do something.
So I used to split up the room, and I used to have the crystals under the bed, and they would correlate with the chakras. And then I would put pyramids on either side. And I would do this thing with incense where I'd wave it around in an infinity loop, and then I'd get the singing bowl, and it was very theatrical. And I was like, yeah, wow. I think if someone was to come in person, I definitely don't think I'd be doing those things anymore. Like, I think it's, it's evolved beyond that. But I don't know about you, but I feel like every session teaches me something, and every session I found that, especially in the last year, when I work with other healers, their modality of their way of channeling frequency comes through to me for me to relay it to them of how they can work. So I find that really cool because, like, in a week, I might explore several different ways of healing modality that's not mine, but it's like kind of come through in a download and then it's been gifted to them for them to go away and start working with. So I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I have noticed in the changes that we've gone through with this strange thing, it's like become this weird mix between complete woo-woo weirdness and then this strangely clinical therapeutic practice. You know what I mean? It's like a weird mix. It's like completely and utterly wild and like out there, and then also very just tell me how you're doing today. Tell me about your mother. I mean, not that that's even a thing I would say, but there's like a weird mix of like clinical kind of mindset and this totally strange, extra terrestrial kind of thing, which who knows, maybe we're going on the windy, crazy road here, but and I realize I'm asking you tons of questions on your channel. I'm sorry, but I do have another question if that's
Sure.
okay. And this is also an observation, and I don't know, maybe it's a little bit inflammatory, not intentionally inflammatory, but I have been making an observation with people within our community. And here's the thing, even myself, I am not separate from this idea or this tendency. But do you ever notice how all of the people in the sort of disclosure, spiritual ascension, whatever buzzword you want to add on to it, all of your extraterrestrial experiences are filtered through 5 races? Why? Why is it always Pleiadians, Arcturians, Syrians, and there's a couple others, reptilians, and then, I don't know, maybe there's a wild card one. Why is it that every day I'll turn on somebody's blog or somebody's video or something and they're like, I got more messages from the Arcturians, and it's like, dude, there's 20 bazillion gajillion planets and civilizations out there. How come everybody on Earth is stuck on these same beings? Have you ever noticed that? What does that mean?
I have, actually.
Maybe I'm being kind of jaded and somewhat, like.
Oh, the Lyrans, yeah.
Oh, Lyra, there you go, Lyrans. I was trying to get the other one.
Yeah. Maybe it's because they're the most spoken about in the collective consciousness, so that when people are having these interactions with, higher dimensional beings, that's part of the filter that they perceive it through. And I was having this conversation recently with someone who's just started to come into cosmic awareness and consciousness and contact. And, that's quite jarring, the initial. And I was saying that at least the progressive stage of my interactions, and I've seen it with other people, is like it starts off with spirit guides and deceased loved ones, and then it may move into the angelic realm, and then you take that leap into the galactic realm. And so there's that sort of progression. Some people skip the angelic realm because it's not in a sort of a resonance, but I think you kind of perceive it through the lens of the so it could be all different types of individuals, but because that's what or seen, and that's in your conscious awareness, it's like that filter is then placed on, oh, that's the Arcturian, so that's the but I'm curious because, like, I see them as frequency color. I'm like, oh, there's a new color.
Yeah.
What is
that? So it's like a color-based identification system, we could say, for you.
Yes.
Interesting. No, that sounds very, very legitimate. I have noticed in my own way, and here's the thing. I guess you kind of just described the process. We filter our understandings of what is real and what isn't through our pre-existing, what I call the pre-existing mental vocabulary of what we've learned and experienced from other sources. And so if we don't have any other names with which to give what we're encountering, it makes sense. We're going to fit it into a certain category. I guess the place where I tend to get weird at times is that, and maybe this is the difference between me and other people, but I have a feeling, because I talked to a lot of other people about this as well, that a lot of other people have this experience as well. I think we had on my channel, we had this guy Barry Littleton on recently, who's also been done all kinds of beings and strange things, and it just oozes authenticity. You talk to him and you're like, yes, you definitely have. And he was very similar to me in that for some reason or another, we've had a number of experiences where we encounter these strange beings, and, you know, no one really takes you in a ship. No one picks you up in this ship outside in your backyard and takes you out to the moon. It was nothing like that. And even more so, nobody ever said, I am so-and-so, and I am from this dimension and from this planet. And I think for a lot of my kind of just experience and time in this sort of community or soul group, I think a lot of us will get this idea that because they didn't identify themselves as part of the Galactic Federation of Light, well, that wasn't a real experience. It was not real. And I think that's the concern for me, because I have this feeling that we're about to enter the stage on Earth where a whole new crew of people are going to start coming forth saying, man, there's this thing and these beings and these energies that are happening, and you'll know it's real, but it's like, it's nothing like this weird predetermined, constructed, convoluted version of what all these people are talking about right now. And anyway, watch out. I'll go on and on about it, but it's
well, can you go on and on while I take a quick break?
Oh yeah, please,
right.
please,
because I'd like to keep going.
I've totally been there, by the way, where you're like, whoa, I really have to go pee right now, and I'm really enjoying this, but I really have to. So yeah, no, it totally is.
And normally I'd be like, oh, just
no, it's totally cool. We're gonna talk about capsule phrases for a few moments. Seriously. So yeah, feel free. Go ahead. It's okay. Okay, cool. We have just successfully hijacked the Cosmic Gateway channel. And so the first thing I need everyone to do if you're watching this channel is put the last 4 digits of your social security number and your mother's maiden name in the chat. If you're from a country that doesn't have social security numbers, or if you don't know what that is, just put a series of numbers, a weird series of numbers. Anyway, I mentioned we're going to talk about capsule phrases, and it is one of the primary tools that we use within the work that I've been doing. And part of my assignment right now in the work that I'm doing is to familiarize people with what is essentially a version of what we might call an ancient language, a collection of words, utterances, or audible vibrations that our body creates that have an ability to open up chakras, to open up meridians within the body, to activate layers of your organs. And what we're finding out, what we're discovering through those of us that are doing this work and continually seeing people and kind of exploring the inner realms, is that we're at a stage of the human journey in which the layers around the organs, the actual non-physical layers of energy and emotion and experience around your organs, they're of paramount importance because they're affecting our well-being, our physical balance, but they're also something that we are gaining control over and have an ability to sort of change and work with. And so one of the primary tools that I use in the work that I'm doing, because for those of you guys that are watching, we were kind of talking about our progression and evolution of working as a professional practitioner. Hi there. Sorry, I'm going on a rant about capsule phrases.
I couldn't hear you. I was like, what?
Oh, really? Oh, that's okay, because I also made a couple really weird jokes at the start, but everybody knew they were I was joking. But anyway, what I was about to say was that one of the things that we're finding out is incredibly effective for those that are learning to work with energy, for those that are on the path to understanding or developing their intuitive abilities. The energy around our organs and the ways in which the energies are mixing between the chakra system and the meridian body are just starting to become so much more palpable, and we have control over them on a different level. And so anyway, the point that I was getting to is there is a collective language or these utterances that we can now use, whether if you resonate with them, to open up those places in the body. And I was actually going to put them in the chat, but I realized I don't have ability to put anything in the chat. So I'm going to say it out loud. Oh no, it's totally cool. I'm literally going to say a couple of them out loud, and then we'll move on. But it's the reason why I'm doing this, as you walked away, is part of my mission right now within the work that I'm doing. You might have already heard this part, maybe not, but is to kind of disseminate and give out additional tools and techniques and frequencies that people can use as they go through their own process of self-discovery. And the capsule phrases that we use within the School of Multidimensional Intuition through my experience and what the words I'm getting from people, I believe it's increasing, not necessarily in potency, but it's sort of like the 100th monkey effect, where more people grab on, then boom, something fully forms and suddenly everyone's doing it. We're experiencing a phenomenon with that. So I'm going to give people two that you could use right now. Very simple utterances. And by utterance, I mean it's a thing, it's a sound of an actual thing you'll make out of your body. And so the reason why we're doing these two is because what I've been observing with the people I'm working with, and I think probably also with you, because especially if you're working with new mothers or people that are going through the conception process or all of the details of that, there's certain places on the energy body that they just need to be activated and flowing and working in order for us to have certain experiences. And so everyone knows this by now, but two places of paramount importance: the root and earth star chakra down at the bottoms of your feet, and what makes up the basis of the human energy body. And then also what we might call the sacral chakra, or the bundle of what we would call fire energy or creative energy that exists within the lower chakras. A lot of us know right now that our creative energy is being completely sapped, controlled, and just parasitically drawn out by the powers that be. But there are a number of things we can use, additional tools. And so the first one, it's 3 syllables. This is for the root and the earth star chakra, and it is pronounced Ma Ru Va. Ma Ru Va. And so what it is, it's 3 syllables. When those syllables are uttered or vibrated within the human body, it creates a settling and what I kind of call a coagulation or a building of energy down at the bottoms of the feet or within the perineum. Go. Okay, whoa, rad. That's a very good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one. I'll say the other one and then I'll pause. I know I'm going on, sorry.
No,
And so the other one that we can use to open up the fire centers within the sacral chakra, and I say centers because there's many, there's like tons, there's all kinds of little pockets of energy and things. It's a wild zone. But what you can do is you can use this vibration to help harmonize. A little bit different than when we use Maruva. Maruva kind of opens and creates a foundation, almost like so someone could stand on their feet with their legs spread and you feel more like, and so when you use this next one, it creates an upward movement of fire in the body, and that is Yavura. Yavura. And so just real quickly, and then I'll stop ranting here. The way we say them, the way we use them in the work that we do is very much like a mantra. Yavura Maruva. And so anyway, thanks for letting me take over your channel for a minute. I'll pause there.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you for that. Because I know you use a lot of sound, don't you? And like that's something I haven't kind of dabbled or explored in, but I would like to. So
here's the crazy thing. You don't, and I shouldn't say this, but I always do. It's like I'll say this cool thing about myself and then I'll totally cut it down. The reality is you don't even actually have to make the sound. What I have observed is that those are what I would call, and maybe it's a kind of a dumb way to describe it, but it's like these are fourth or third to fourth density training wheels. It's the way we train the physical, or one of the ways in which we train the physical human body to send non-physical energies through a vibration. And it's like everyone can use the voice, so pretty much anyone can do it. But that's kind of the essence of it. It's literal vocal transmission. It's kind of like a calling card or a frequency, or I always forget the term. I think it was cymatic experiments, but I might have the term wrong, where they would vibrate the surface. It might not be cymatic. Sorry, somebody out there knows. I saw Adam Marquise in the chat. He'll know. He knows what I'm talking about. But they'll sort of vibrate a surface, and the shape will change. You know how they would put like sand or something on it, and they put this frequency in it, and like it'll become like a shape. So it's very, very, very similar to that. But anyway,
awesome. Well, going back to what we're talking about, all the different types of beings, I want to share this experience that I had going back to, I don't know, a month ago. I had a friend of mine contact me saying that she thought that she was having a stroke, but she'd gone to the doctors and they said it wasn't a stroke, but she said, can you clear my energy field, because I think I'm being sort of attacked. I feel like there's some sort of So I said to her, look, go to the hospital and I'll tune in and see what I can see. And so I did that, and I did see this kind of weird ant creature being, like a insect sort of being that was kind of on the top of her head. So I just did a bit of a clearing and just sort of, and I wasn't able to speak to her for a couple of weeks. And then when I got back, we had a chat, and she said, yeah, I did have several strokes and it's impacted her vision and things like that. And I said, well, I did a clearing, and I'll just run through what I saw. And I saw these sort of insect-like beings that were sort of sitting around the top of the head, almost kind of like feeding, you know. And she goes, oh, that's really weird, because even though I've lost some of my vision, I keep seeing these apparitions of bug insect things going.
Oh, damn.
And I was like, oh. And the doctors had told her that that's very common in stroke patients to see apparitions of insects. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, that opens this pondering of like, what is really happening in those, I guess you can look at it from the different vantage points of multidimensionality. Yeah. But have you come across it? Like, I haven't had the opportunity to work with anyone that I know of that's had a stroke. But
you know what's weird? I actually did recently. It's crazy that you're even talking about this. And I didn't mean to instantly cut you off. Was there more you're going to say before I start?
That was it.
Sorry, I have a tendency. Everybody knows this about me. I'll just talk at people for a while, so it's like I have to be like, okay, sorry. Otherwise, I'll just like go on this thing. And so, I actually had been told this at another stage of my. It sounds so weird, but at a very young age, around like 13 or 14 years old, I remember listening to the Coast to Coast AM television show or radio show. Whoa, sorry. Out here, and I remember like somebody was on there years ago, and I was a kid. One of the first times I heard it, and they were talking about how demons or something gave this woman a stroke, and I remember hearing that decades ago, and I was like, "Yep," because they can. And, just a random detail one would hear, but, you don't really hear about that too often. Lo and behold, a few months back, a person came into our Patreon group and described, and she did it publicly, so it's not me kind of blowing up her info, but she was like, hey, I was doing energy work on a person, and I was working with this person, and they had an entity, and it attacked me, and I think she had 2 strokes or something as well. And so it was just interesting to hear the way those sort of come back. And here's the other funny thing. My mom, after having the forced medical procedure, also had a number of strokes and nearly died as well. And she also has talked about how, there's these presences or these energies or these things that it's like they were never there before and they're suddenly there now. And, granted, I haven't talked to my mom too much about it. I don't know that she even would, but it stands to reason that upon a massive shock or a change within the electrochemical makeup of the, what I call the, the mental body or, just the brain and all of the, the infrastructure, both physical and non-physical up there, that when there's a massive shock, it'll fundamentally alter the ways in which that being perceives certain things. And I think some people will get tuned into what we would call elements of the parasitic construct. I think at times it's not even that they're tuned into it. It's that there's a few filters or maybe, cracks in the glass, and suddenly they're seeing outside and they're like, whoa, what the hell? Somebody just went, and so now they're seeing what's already there. And then I think also there's an effect that takes place because I have actually talked to a person that got struck by lightning, and they had a number of just effects. Like, well, they didn't get fully struck, but they got struck enough to where they got rocked by the electricity. And they had a whole activation of stuff on the right side of their body. It's like their vision changed on the right, but it didn't get worse. It got better, but also weirder with like colors and shapes. And it's like she said that she would see like auras around half of people's body. Anyway, all kinds of crazy stuff. So we know it does lead to a fundamental shift in how people perceive stuff. But anyway, I am absolute believer in it. And I, as in my own life, I think I've been affected by a number of those things at different stages of the journey. One of the first kind of primary self-healing things I went through was actually what I believe it was like pulling some form of a mass off the back of my head. And it was this thing where I had to go through this battle, and it's weird how stuff happens in the shower. It was literally, I was literally in the shower on my hands and knees in 2016, not realizing that I was going through an internal struggle with some sort of an entity that had attached myself. I believe, kind of like you were saying, it was like on the head or like on the back of my head. And it was like, as soon as I would try to grab onto it, it would go away. So I was like, I can't put my hand. So it's like I had to sit there and go through this sort of internal dialogue, which sounds crazy, but I literally would have like these conversations. And there is a series of, it's funny, I don't know if I've ever talked about this before. Thanks for opening this kind of worms. But there was a series of, I think, 2 or 3 nights, maybe more. I'm not really sure. It was a strange time in my life where it was like I would be in the shower at like 3 a.m. and I would be like battling in this weird internal conversation with something that I could perceive was attached to my head. And I knew that it was, in hindsight, because I heard later on, a couple years later, people talking about how they would connect with this. And when they would try to pull their mind or their hand or their energy to it, it would become even more distorted. And it's like the voice would change and it would start to create this playback of all of your worst thoughts. And what, for me, what I encountered in those moments was I had to have this literal battle with it in my head. And I would experiment with these approaches. One of my approaches, which is a thing that I see people do, they become hyper aggressive internally and they do this like, I'm going to rip you out. It's like you'll become this sort of like, you'll embody this warrior thing. And I tried to do that and it didn't really, it's almost like it would go and just like wait, and I would like fight and go through all this stuff. And then honestly, the time when I realized that it finally went is I was like literally kneeling down in the shower and my head was against the spout of the bathtub, and I was like, and I think what I can recall in that moment is it's almost like there was a forgiveness and an acceptance. But I promise you, I did not say, I forgive you. It was nothing like that. It was just like one of those things where it was like, almost like my body made a choice to let it go without me consciously going, okay. And it was like, I literally felt the sound in my head and the sound of the water hitting the shower. You know how you can hear that shh? It was like everything changed. And suddenly it was like, kind of like in the 90s when everybody got that bass boost on their sort of like Walkmans or whatever it was. And suddenly you're like, whoa, there was like a little whole change in a layer of sound. And it was like everything around me sort of cleared up and almost got more troubly. And it was weird because it was just this thing that passed. And then I was like, oh yeah, anyway, just literally went on with my life, not realizing that I had been battling with some parasitic thing. And anyway, I know I'm going on and on. Thank God it didn't give me
No, that's great. I mean, that's been I did a video going back a month ago talking about like entity attachments and like my perception of it. And, I truly believe that we, if there's a disturbance in our energy field, it creates a frequency match that invites something like that in. So it can be trauma, it can be self-contracted. And when we're able to understand the reason, the lesson of whatever that experience has created for us, and come into neutrality or forgiveness, like just like you said, there is this like clearing that occurs, and then it's no longer that need for but
Weird.
people go, oh, but don't you get scared? And I was like, no, because if you make the connection and understand that darker entities clearly, like their whole energy food source is through fear, then you got to come into that place of like not, and sometimes that, that comes over time. Like that's not something that comes straight away. But if you can have that thought in your head that it's like, the more fearful I am of this being, the more life it's giving it. And you can sort of come back into a place of understanding. I like to kind of like pull them out, like whether it's myself or working on, I just like pull them to a side and I start talking to them. I'm like, why are you here? What are you doing? Like, what's up? And talk to them. And
that's a rightful thing to do, in my opinion. That's a really good idea. But anyway, go on.
And but I think when you're got that energy of fight and battle, that is exacerbating it constantly. And I noticed that with like people who have diagnosed with schizophrenia and things like that. The more they fight and battle with it, the more it exacerbates it. It's more about like winning with it, like you would like in a bar fight, right? Instead of like battling and continuing
Yeah.
that fight. It's like, stop, like, hey, what's the issue here? And quite often, you know, if they're like souls that are just a bit lost, you know, you can offer them a pathway out of being in that in between limbo place. Other ones, you know, they give a bit more of a fight, but it's like, you know, showing them and recognize that they also have light within them, even if it's very, very deep seated, and transition them. I just open up portals and like pop them through, but I make sure I close the portal. So,
Totally. Which is a very, very real thing. I have talked about portal where actually what's weird is I haven't really even been working with that energy so much lately. And it's funny because I haven't even heard that many people talking about opening up portals as a way to release or to bring in positive or, you know, to release negative energy. But it is literally real. It's one of those things that I hear other energy workers talking about. And I think that other people that are coming into this understanding of this work will be like, well, you just opened this portal and you go through into this other dimension. Well, I mean, and the reality is that is literally possible, but it is one of the natural human abilities is to be able to open up pockets of time and non-physical space through which you can physically and non-physically interact with it. So I always get excited when I hear people talking about that because I'm like, dude, it's literally real. It's literally real. And you can actually open a portal and energies will come through. And I've experienced negative portals and positive portals. And I honestly, my first ever experience with portals, which I don't know, is it okay if I talk about that? I don't want to go on too long.
No, I love it. I've got a story after you. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
cool.
triggering.
I just get hyper conscious of like, am I talking too much? But I worked in a physical shop for the first couple of years of this journey, which a lot of people have heard out in literally in not necessarily in Hollywood, but just in the part of LA where all that wild stuff was going on. And there was a stage where myself and this other practitioner there, and I chose to bring him along because I was like, let's make it a team thing. But we got hired to clear this house. And when we went over to this house, turns out the guy, he was an animator for Pixar, you know, the sort of the anime. And he had like, it was a trip because I was blown away by all the movies he had worked on. He had like all this stuff in his house, like all these, you know, like illustrations. And then he had one corner of his house where there was a fireplace, and there was above the fireplace a picture of two Chihuahua dogs that he had literally painted. Like, you know how people will be like, I'm going to have a portrait of my pets. And he had both of the dogs painted on this portrait that was above the fireplace. And I remember he was like, one of the dogs is gone. It was just missing. Something happened to it. And that was secondary. But the story was that it was almost like a movie, literally like a movie. And he was like, we had this maid and, you know, she was really cool and she got really weird. And suddenly, I fired her. I had to fire her, and lo and behold, she died a couple weeks later. I mean, literally like out of a movie script, she died shortly thereafter. And ever since then, all this crazy stuff had been going on in their house. And so I remember asking him, because it was the first time I'd ever dealt with such a thing. And I was like, okay, cool. So what do we do? And he's like, well, all I know is she was always over at the fireplace, burning stuff and doing all these little things. And she would bring, incense in and pictures. And I was like, dude, she's doing rituals in your house. And so it was one of the first encounters that I had with an actual portal that was letting energy in. And just like you were saying with the woman that had that stroke, it was an energy that you had a conversation with. Almost like I would stop in front of the fireplace and nowhere else in the house. But if you would stand in front of the fireplace, a conversation of energy would open up in your body. And the conversation of energy was one, it was like angry, bitter, betrayed. And I realized that it was literally that woman's energy coming through a portal. And so anyway, I'm going to make a long story really short. What we ended up doing at the time, which is probably overkill, but what I did was I was advised to get a very long spool of red thread. This is going to sound so weird. And what I did is get ready. And I was advised, through this internal kind of conversation I had, to get a spool of red thread, to get 4 railroad spikes, like the big nails that you would hammer into a railroad, to get this is so specific, seriously, a cigar box, a cigarette, and I think there were some flowers. And what we did is I gridded off the perimeter of the entire home with red thread suspended between the railroad spikes. and we did a ritual in front of the fireplace that I think was her spirit reaching out saying, do this thing. And what it was that we put that up and we burned a cigarette and some incense and put some flowers